Ephesians 4. As a prisoner for the Lord, then, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all, and through all, and in all. But to each one of us, grace has been given as Christ apportioned it. This is why it says, when he ascended on high, he took many captives and gave gifts to his people. What does he ascended mean, except that he also descended to the lower earthly regions? He who descended is the very one who ascended higher than all the heavens in order to fill the whole universe. So Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and teachers to equip his people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the full measure of the fullness of Christ. Then we will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every wind of teaching and by the cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming. Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become, in every respect, the mature body of him who is the head, that is Christ. From him the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love, as each part does its work. This is the word of the Lord.
All right, good morning, church. So we have been talking about our church for the last few weeks, and we're going to continue doing that. What it is because every September around this time, we kind of stop and pause and say, okay, what are we all about? What are we doing as a church? Why do we exist? What are we here for? So if you've been sort of new to us in the past couple weeks, again, this is not our usual way of having this time, but it's a matter of opening up the hood and checking the engine and seeing, okay, what drives this church? What is this church really all about? So we talked about what is our mission before, and our mission is simple, is to make disciples of all people. And that's, in general, the Great Commission anyways, that Jesus gave us before he left this earth. And that's something that we as a church embrace. As well, we talked about our vision, and this is the one that's kind of changed over the last while. And again, our vision is that we're a place where we multiply, connect, build, and care. And with that, we want to have all people know the life-transforming power of Christ. And so we want to just continue to encourage you to understand what's going on in your church. And we hope that not only you understand it, but you get excited about it because, like we said a couple weeks ago, this church is a good church and we have a lot of things going well. But we cannot keep doing things unless the people in the church are involved. And so there are ways in which we can be involved. There are ways in which you can contribute. Some of us, it's through our finances that we're going to contribute, because without the finances that you give, we can't put on projects that we have, such as the free summer day camp or the carnival that we did to reach our community. Or maybe it is of your time and energy where you come and you serve, you get involved in the church, and we can't run certain programs like our kids programs or our youth programs. We can't have our worship here unless people are involved. And so this is something that we're going to talk about today, is what does it mean for us to get involved in the church? What does it mean for us to serve? So within this time, we're going to talk about just some ways you can get involved, but more so, why bother trying to get involved? Why do you even want to bother with that? And we're talking about that today. And next week, we're going to wrap everything up. Again, we're going to remind you one final time about our church. Small groups are part of the ways we build relationships. We're going to remind you again what our vision and mission is. And we're going to remind you again what it means to serve. Keep this on your radar. Thanksgiving is just around the corner. Keep this one on your radar. Thanksgiving is around the corner. So on Thanksgiving Day, please, it's an opportunity again. We want to remind you it's a holiday. It's a great time to invite friends to the church. We're going to have a special time in the after the service for some extra food. All right, Thanksgiving. Right, you're gonna get the pre-workout of your meal before the actual Thanksgiving dinner that you're gonna have, right? So bring friends, bring your family, bring anyone to church in a couple weeks' time from now. So if you've got a Bible, turn it on or open it up, and you can drop yourself at Ephesians 4. But we're not going to stay there today. We're going to be jumping around a bit. But with that, what we want you to do is also know this. We talk about serving one another. Now, I'm going to use the word serve, or I'm going to use the word get involved. Well, the word I'm going to try not to use is volunteer. Okay, I'm going to try to stay away from that word. Volunteer for us kind of has these weird connotations today. But we want to just keep you on the idea of serving, getting involved in the church. And the first thing that, if you're here and you're not quite sure what this church is about, here's something I want you to know. And if you've been here for a long time, maybe you forgot this. If you've been a Christian for a long time, sometimes we forget this too. But what this is that we want everyone in the church to be spiritual contributors. We want everyone in this church to be a spiritual contributor, not a spiritual consumer. We live in a day and age where you can consume all kinds of material, that you sit back passively and you can just observe. So you go to the movies and you just let someone play a movie for you and you just receive it. You go to a concert and all you do is you just receive what's happening there. When you come to church, we don't want you to think of church as a theater or a concert where you just sit back like you're doing and you just absorb everything that someone's giving to you. We do believe that it involves all of us to be contributing in some way. In fact, you all were doing it this morning. The worship team can't lead singing if y'all don't sing, right? So you got to get involved. And if Jared's up here clapping his hands and none of us are clapping along with him, he looks like a fruitcake up here. But unless you contribute, he's going to feel awkward, and he's going, oh man, they didn't like my clapping, they didn't like my song, they didn't like my hair, maybe my fly was down, like, nothing, right? Nothing personal, right? So, we contribute. We need to contribute, and we're spiritually contributing to the church, not spiritually. Because I like that phrase, spiritual contributors, not spiritual consumers. I got to say, I didn't make up that phrase. Craig Rochelle, one of the people that I listen to on a podcast, he has this wonderful phrase all the time. Now, as you're here, again, if you're here and you've only been here for a while, what we want to say is this: welcome. We're glad you're here, and in this time, we're not expecting you to get involved, okay? So what we want to say by this is we want you to get to know us, and we want us to get to know you. So if you've been here within the last couple months, give it some time, all right? So maybe we try to give that 6 month to 1 year frame. So if you've been here recently, don't feel obligated. Sit back, just understand kind of what's going on, because you may want to get involved in something. You may just sit back and go, I'm not really sure where I fit in yet. And we want to say, that's okay, take your time. If you've been here for more than a year, okay, you've made this place your spiritual home, we want you to start contributing. Some of you guys have been here for a long time and you stopped serving. We're hoping that during that season of rest, or maybe you had some healing that you needed from being burnt out, or maybe you were also physically just tired about it. We say, maybe it's time for us to rethink this and get involved again, all right? So that's what we're talking about today. Now with that, when we get involved. Now, one of the things about this passage in the book of Ephesians, so again, if you have it, you can open up to chapter 4. Paul, who writes this letter to the church in Ephesus, and he's writing to them because he wants them to know something in particular about their church, and he wants to give them an image. He wants to give them the image that every person who is part of the church understands that they serve one God. Right? And that's one of the key things, is that we serve one God. We serve God. And sometimes, yes, you will indeed serve other people, but by serving other people, you are still serving God. But one of the images he gives for the church is this wonderful image called the body. And y'all are sitting here and y'all have bodies, you have fingers and toes. And some of you experience various issues in your body that when certain things stop working, you feel almost incomplete. And then you start to figure out what it is. So sometimes it is your eyesight. Your eyesight deteriorates. I'm starting to feel that when I read books. I'm doing this now. I got to lift up these glasses so that I can see the print a little bit better. And my eyesight is starting to go. And I know something is wrong. And I feel there's something that I got to do about it. Right? And so Paul gives us this image that this church is the body. That every person contributes it in some way. It's what makes it complete. It's what makes it whole. Now, it's not to say that if we don't have wholeness, there's something wrong. In fact, what's going on in Toronto this weekend and this entire week is called the Invictus Games. Right? In Toronto, you have the Invictus Games, and what the Invictus Games are were soldiers on the battlefield who were injured, who lost appendages and who were broken mentally, and they're competing in games like an Olympic-style games, and it's to show that even though there's something incomplete, I'm not broken completely. I'm not going to let this conquer me. Right? And so the church, even though we will be missing parts, it won't conquer the church. Right? But we want you to see that this is the body, you're a part of it, that you may think I'm nothing, I don't really have anything to offer, and I'm saying to you, well, Paul says you're part of the body. Most of us don't think about a fingernail until you break the fingernail and it hurts. Most people don't think about a hangnail until you pull the skin and you go, oh, it hurts. And those are insignificant things per se, but they do contribute. They do have an effect on the body. And within this passage in Ephesians, he talks about various ways in which people are gifted. He talks about various ways in which people are gifted. Some are you're going to be gifted to do, when we talk about pastoring, you're going to be gifted to be an evangelist. You're going to be gifted to teach, right? And even amongst us pastors, so myself, Jordan, and Enoch, we're so different, and we're so gifted in so many different ways that I'm really surprised, well, not fully surprised, but I'm really pleasantly surprised how God brought this team together, right? Because Enoch is good at certain things, and Jordan is good at certain things, and I'm good at certain things, and then vice versa. Enoch's not good at certain things, but you know what? I found the things that Enoch's not good at, I'm good at. And the things that I'm not good at, Jordan is good at. And that's how God put this team together, and it's part of the body. And we see that, we experience that as pastors every day, every week as we're here together. And so we hope that you want to contribute to the body and find what those gifts are. So how is this going to happen? What does this mean for us? So when you're getting involved, what happens? Well, one of the things that tends to happen is you discover and develop. When you are getting involved, you discover and you develop your talents, your abilities, your skills, and your spiritual gifts. Some of you guys have been born with great talents, skills, and abilities already. And that was God given to you. And when you become a believer, you are also given at least one spiritual gift. But sometimes you're not going to find that out until you get involved, until you start serving. And it's when you start serving, you go, wow, I didn't realize that I could do this. I didn't realize that I had this in me. And 1 Corinthians 12, right there, that passage there, says there are different kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit distributes them. There are different kinds of service with the same Lord. Again, we're talking about all of us will be different. We all have different ways of serving God. We all have different abilities and gifts and talents, but we serve one God. And so there are different kinds of working, but in all of them and in everyone, it is the same God at work. And so it's about all these different things that are working together. Some of you guys are really good with numbers, mathematics. You're just quick. You're looking at a person who wasn't that good with math, right? And some of you guys are excellent at reading and grammar and structure and style. Some of you guys are excellent at technical things like computer programming. Some of you guys are talented because God gave you a gift of music, or your parents forced you to take piano for 8 years, and somehow you know how to play piano, right? Some of you guys are gifted with dance. Some of you guys are hand-eye coordinated gifted. Some of you guys can look at that wall and you go, I know that wall's not level, right? And some of you guys can look at the color of the carpet and go, wow, that kind of clashes with this.
right? And so God has gifted us in so many different ways, but one of the ways in which when you get involved, you start to discover what those gifts are, and you get to develop them even more so. And that's one of the reasons, one of the things that happens when we get involved is that we discover and we develop our spiritual gifts. 1 Corinthians continues to say, just as one body, again, he uses this image of the body again in Corinthians. And Paul says, just as a body, though one, has many parts, but all its many parts form one body, so it is with Christ. For we are all baptized by one Spirit, so as to form one body, whether Jew or Gentile, slave or free, whether we were all given that one Spirit to drink. So even so, the body is not made up of one part, but of many. Every one of us contributes in some way. And we hope that you will discover and develop some of those gifts. Another thing that happens when you get involved is this. You honor God. You honor God. It's an act of worship when you get involved. Some people think that worship, unfortunately people think that worship just happens in this time where we sing a couple songs and we're singing to God and that's worship. No, worship is greater than that. And one of the ways in which it's also greater is that when we get involved and when we serve, it's an act of our worship. And in 1 Peter 4, it says that each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength that God provides, so that in all things God may be what? Praised through Jesus Christ. To him be glory and power forever and ever. Amen. You know, the thing about serving is that people will say thank you. And many of us will probably try to brush that off. Oh, no, it's okay. Or the worst thing, by the way, one of those little pet peeves of mine in life, when you say thank you and a person says, no problem, that irks me, right? The proper response is what? You're welcome, right? But anyhow, why was I going off on that? Okay, so again, if you serve, people will look at that and say thank you, and you go, you know what? Thanks for the encouragement. I just wanted to honor God, right? It's so that you would praise God. Again, some of you are sitting here because people are serving right now in the background. They're taking care of your kids, right? And they don't get to sing songs here, but they're worshiping by serving you, by taking care of your kids. And you can say thanks to them, and they're going to sit there and say, you know what? It's because I am worshiping God too, through this way. I'm serving God and worshiping God in this way. So when we do that, we point people back to God and says it honors God. God receives glory. People look at what you do and they say, wow, thank you for doing that. But you can redirect them and always say, you know what, it's God who deserves glory. And they go, yeah, it is. And so thank you for what you did so that I could also worship God and honor God too. So getting involved helps us to honor God. Another thing that it does is that serving or getting involved helps us to become more like Jesus. There's a passage in Matthew. It's a very sharp passage. And by sharp I mean it cuts, it hurts. Matthew 25. This is when Jesus is telling the story of a king, and the king has said to his disciples, he said, thank you for taking care of me. And the people replied, when did we take care of you? And he goes on this rant about whenever you took care of the poor, the widowed, the ones who were outcasts in society, when you took care of those people, the ones that were the least in our society, when you took care of them, you were taking care of me. And then he turns to another group and he says, they said, we didn't know that was you. We didn't know that by taking care of those kinds of people, we would be taking care of you. And Jesus turns to them and says, you know what? I don't even know you. It's a very sharp, cutting passage. But what this means is that for us, when we get involved and start serving, it helps us to be like Jesus. Because you start looking at people the way Jesus would have looked at them. And so when someone comes to you and says, they don't know what to do, you look at them. You don't judge them by their physical appearance. You don't judge them by any physical infirmities. You don't judge them by their skin tone. You don't judge them by what they're wearing, their socioeconomic class. You don't judge them by anything. You treat them the way Jesus would have. And when we do that, we become more like Jesus. It's hard though, because everything about us is conflicted sometimes. We like safety and comfort. We like the things that we're used to. We like the things that are similar to us. But Jesus says, no, I'm going to bring people to you in front of you all the time who won't be the same as you. But when you treat them with the care and dignity that you would treat me, you will become more like me. And serving does that. Serving helps us to look at children when they're crying. Instead of all of us turning our heads to that child over there who's crying in the worship service, we go, oh, they're just singing songs to Jesus. It's okay, right? Instead of looking at that mom who's struggling to hold the two babies and go, what's wrong with you? We would look at them and say, can I help you? Right? When a person walks in all starry-eyed and not sure where to go in this church because they're new, because it's a big building, we're not going to sit there and go, look at them. What are they doing here? We could, right? But the way Jesus would want us to do it is say, hi, how can I help you? And so that's something for us to always consider in the back of our heads, how we can become more like Jesus. Another way in which getting involved, what it blesses us with, it surrounds us with others who can help us follow Jesus. One of the great things is that you don't serve by yourself. Especially in this church, we never serve by ourselves. We're always in teams. We're always in teams. We're always working together. I love what Hebrews here says. It says, let us consider how we may spur one another toward love and good deeds, and not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. One of the wonderful things is that we get to do this together. And you will find things out about someone else and go, wow, I didn't know that about you, and I'm so glad. One of the things, a couple of weeks ago, we had our leadership orientation day for the leaders in our church, and we were sharing stories. We were sharing stories of how people came to faith. And it's interesting. You don't know these stories unless you get to work with people and get to talk to people about this as you serve together. Over the last while, we've had some major projects in this church, right? The summer day camp, the free week that we did to our community, and the carnival. There were groups of people serving together all the time. We matched people up and said, you know what, you're going to work together and serve together with this group. And you got to learn more about that other person. You were like, wow, I didn't know that about faith. I didn't know that about your life. And it encourages me to also follow Jesus. It's really cool. And you know, one of the things I've always loved was short-term mission trips. I've always loved those. And if you don't know, one of the things I always loved doing back for many years is I would go to Phoenix, and we would go north of Phoenix up into the Navajo reservation and serve there. Some of you guys have gone with me, right? And some of you guys have gone with me, and we've done that together. The stories, right? The stories we can share, the inside jokes that you have. You know, the funniest things about those are all those little things that happen, and it just encourages us that we were following Jesus and we got to experience that together. And some of the hilarious stories were like, Adrian's not here today, is she? Okay, good, I could talk about her. Like Adrian was, she fell asleep on the plane, and we scribbled all over her face in Sharpie, and we looked at Sandra, and Sandra was her mom, and she's like, yeah, keep going. You know, and she's like, pass me a marker. And she's like drawing all over Adrian's face. And we're like, that's parenting 101. I want to be like you, Sandra. When my kids are teenagers, I'm going to draw over their face when they're teenagers. And it encourages me, right? Well, you know what I'm saying, right? So these are some of the ways as well that it helps us, that we would be surrounded by people who can help us follow Jesus. It's exciting to spur one another on, encourage each other. You can't do the Christian life alone. You cannot do the Christian life alone. And far be it, you cannot serve on an island alone. And so we want to encourage you to continue to serve, get involved. It helps you follow Jesus. Another thing is that it increases your faith. It increases your faith. How many of you guys have heard the story in Jesus' time, the feeding of the 5,000? Okay, if you've read your Bible, it's in the Gospels. Now, Jesus is speaking, and there's a crowd of people. And he keeps speaking, and eventually it gets late. And, you know, if they send everyone away, it's going to take a long time for them to have dinner ready. Someone says, hey, can we figure out how to have food for them? And there's 5,000 men. That's what's recorded, 5,000 men, not women and children. So imagine if you add women and children, there's more than 5,000. Okay? And Jesus takes a snack, a little kid's snack, and he breaks it up, and he gives it, and everyone was filled with food, and there were leftover baskets. Right? That's a great miracle story. How many of you guys have ever experienced that personally? I'm going to tell you, I got to experience that personally. Right? And it increased my faith because there was that time, we were on the mission field, and we had a community dinner for the community. And we said, all right, come on out. We're going to cook some Chinese food, and you guys can bring some fry bread. Fry bread is great, by the way. and we'll just eat together. And there were more people than we expected. Our cooks only had so much food left. They've been feeding us all week. We only had so much food left. And we looked at that and we said, this is not going to be enough. And the neighbors brought some food, and we looked at it. We put it on the table, and we looked at it, and we go, this is not going to be enough. And one person said, what if we just prayed for a miracle? And how many cynical Christians would go, okay, sure, why not? What else do we got to do? What do we have to lose? We prayed for a miracle. And at the end of it, people were leaving to take home food. We looked down, we're not even sure what happened. Everyone ate, and there were leftovers. And we still, to this day, don't understand. And so my faith level in God went from here to here. That's why whenever we have food here, I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm not worried. When someone's planning something and they go, oh, it's not going to be enough, I'm going to sit there and go, maybe, but I'm not going to worry about that because I believe that God will do that because I got to experience that myself. How many of you guys, if you've served and you've seen God do amazing things and it increases your faith level? You get involved and you're like, God, I don't know how to plan this Sunday school lesson for the kids. I really don't know what to do. And then as you're teaching it, all of a sudden the words just come to you because God is speaking through you and you're like, wait, wow. And it just your faith level just takes a step more. Or you go out in faith and you see a stranger out in the mall and you say, God is somehow pushing you to say something to them, and you start talking to them and all of a sudden they just pour out their life story and you get to hear it and you get to speak into it and you just go, like, wow, your faith level just jumped, right? That's what getting involved does. If your faith is stagnant, if your faith is stuck, get involved. See, the worst thing is that when we think our faith is stagnant and stuck, we're not qualified to get involved. In fact, the opposite is true, is that when you get involved, you get unstuck, right? You get unstuck. And so it increases your faith. Another thing that it does is that, oh, I already used that one. I jumped. Miracles. You get to experience miracles firsthand. In John chapter 2 is when Jesus talks about it's when Jesus turned the water into wine. The people at the party didn't get to really see what happened. They just knew there was great wine for the wedding. But the servants, the ones who were serving, got to experience the miracle firsthand. That was the one I should have used my feeding of the 5,000 for. But you get what I'm saying there. We'll skip that one. But we can experience God in new ways. We get to experience God in different ways. Some of us are used to experiencing God in very limited boxes, in very small spheres. And we say, unless God does it this way, I'm not going to believe. And then all of a sudden God does something totally out of the ordinary and you go, okay, I have to believe, right? But we experience God in different ways. And so it expands your way of understanding God. It expands your experience of God. It challenges you to think again about what you really believe. And God does show up in that way. These last two are more, they're not biblical per se, but they're just there. It's good for you. Why do you think high schools made all the high school kids have 40 volunteer hours before they finished high school? Because they wanted to teach kids that not to be so self-centered, right? It's good for you. It's good when you serve because all of a sudden you cannot just think of yourself. You become more selfless than selfish. It's just good for your soul. The sociology out there, the psychology out there of people who help others to serve, to get involved, it just shows that it's always actually better for the person doing it than the person receiving it. Again, one of the things about going on short-term missions is that, right, Enoch, you guys went for remix. Y'all came back and said, I got more out of that than I gave. I didn't realize that. And it's just, you're just encouraged by that, and it's just good for you. And so serving is a way that it relinquishes that selfishness. You become a little more, you have greater gratitude. You're more thankful for things. So how many of you guys have whiny, selfish, bratty kids? Get them volunteering somewhere, and you'll see the change, right? You'll see the change. One of the amazing things is it opens your eyes in so many ways that you change, and it's for the better. The last one here is just simply this: it's fun. It's fun. You know what's fun about it? Seeing lives changed. Or hearing a kid come to you and say, that was the best camp ever. I'm coming back again, and I'm bringing my friends with me. Right? And it's fun. Serving is joyful. It's not these sourpuss faces that some of you guys are showing here right now. It's great. And I'll let me confess. For me, doing this pastoring thing, it's fun. It's great. There are things that I love doing, and there are things that it's amazing. And I say I do those things for free. There's a lot of other things I have to do. I get paid to do those, right? But the great and wonderful things that happen, you would do it for free because it's amazing. There are so many stories that get to be shared. There's so much excitement that goes on. You're challenged in so many ways. You are stretched. And overall, when you work with people and you have a great time, you build a bond with people, and you go, hey, remember that time when we were serving together? And you just laugh about it because it was great. It was fun. Getting involved in this church is actually fun. We're not a very tight, stick up the rear kind of a church. We're fun. We enjoy company. We enjoy each other. And it's enjoyable when we serve together. Sure, there will be frustrations along the way. Sure, there'll be bumps. But at the end of the day, when you accomplish the goal, when you accomplish the task, it's fun. It's amazing. These are some of the things that we hope you will hear about when we get involved. You get to discover more about your gifts, those talents, abilities, skills. You honor God through worship. You become more like Jesus, and you start to treat people the way Jesus would. You serve, and it surrounds you with other people who can help you follow Jesus. It increases your faith, and you get to experience miracles, and you get to experience God in different ways, and it's just good for you, and it is just good old-fashioned fun. And the reality is this: some of us are going to sit here and we're like, okay, how do I get involved? Okay, and let me just say, there are numerous ways in this church you can get involved. And at the same time, some of you are sitting here thinking, I'm not good enough to get involved. And if you think that, I'm going to remind you again of a very simple principle that God has always used. God has never used qualified people for things. If you look throughout the Bible and the Bible characters, God has never really used the best people. He's just always used obedient people. And when they were obedient, then he gave them the equipping so that they could carry out those tasks. So some of you are sitting here, I'm not good enough, I'm not qualified enough, and we're going to say to you, stop thinking that way. Because that's not God's way. That if you get involved, he will equip you, he will qualify you. We can also offer to you equipping and training. And so if you look at the story of Moses, Moses said, I'm not a good speaker. He was a murderer. He was running for his life. God called him. God called David, who was a little brat of a kid. He was the runt of the family. God called Abraham, who even we find out is a liar a lot. He's so scared that people are attracted to his wife, he lies about it all the time. We see Jacob's life. He is a complete liar, complete deceiver. Noah was a drunk, right? Peter, the disciple, would always put his foot in his mouth. And so the Bible is just full of people. In fact, if you go back to our sermon series in the summer on Heroes of the Faith, all of those people were flawed. But they were just simply one thing, obedient. They got involved, and they served God. With that, let's take this moment. I'm going to just invite us to pray. And if God is speaking to you, I'm just going to give space for the Spirit to move and just speak to you about how you can get involved. After that, I'm just going to invite some people up so you can know how to get involved. So let's just pray. God, we just thank you for today. Thank you for the challenges you've given us in terms of your word and in terms of getting involved in the church. Lord, I thank you for newcomers and friends. I pray for them that, Lord, they would feel welcome, that during this time, Lord, I pray that they can just enjoy their time being at this church, getting to know us and us getting to know them. For those of us who have been here longer, I pray that, God, if we've never been involved, that, God, you would speak to us in ways now that would challenge us to think how we can get involved. Lord, if we are people who have been serving and continually serving, I pray that, God, you would continue to encourage us today. Lord, that you would remind us of who you are and why we serve. And Lord, for those who have been serving, who have been burnt out or needed a break, and maybe it's time for them to get back involved, get involved again, Lord, may you speak to them. God, we just thank you for the church and the image you give us that it's a body, that every person here is important, that every person here would be a contributor to the body. And so, God, we pray that today you would continue to let that message speak to us here now and afterwards from this sanctuary. And so, Lord, all this we lift up to you. In Jesus' name, amen.